This weekend, Chelsea face Manchester City in the Women's League Cup final. We're here to preview all the action. We discuss the impact of playing the same fixture 4 consecutive times, how Man City will play under Nick Cushing, and why it may be a difficult game for Chelsea tactically. This is our Women's League Cup final preview. Alright, let's get into it then. Tomorrow is the Women's League Cup final, the Subway League Cup final as it's now known, of course, between Chelsea and Manchester City. In today's video, we're going to be previewing it, and of course at the end, we will be predicting it. And let's start, Harry, by talking about the road to the final for these two sides. We'll start with Chelsea, as they're the designated home side. Of course, it is a neutral venue, Pride Park in Derby. And let's start there by talking about Chelsea's road to the final. Historically, they've lost the last 3 League Cup finals, which will be a worry, but they did win the 2 before that. They've been involved in all of the last 5 finals. So it's been a good run for Chelsea. This season, quite a nice run to the final.
Yeah, it was a really nice final, facing Championship opposition in the quarter-finals and then having a struggling West Ham side in the semi-finals. But as you say, it's been the trophy over the last couple of years that has always escaped Chelsea and usually ends up in the hands of Arsenal, but that's not going to happen this year. But yeah, it's a final. I think it's one of those where the reason it usually escapes Chelsea is because when they're focusing on the league, when they're focusing on the Champions League and the FA Cup, out of those 4 competitions, the League Cup is usually the one that the Blues let go. But as we've seen this season, Bombastor is on a mission to win every single trophy that Chelsea can. And I don't think there's going to be any of that. No, I mean, I'm not saying Chelsea used to purposely throw away the League Cup final, but it was the one that didn't have as much importance. And I think that Bombastor views every trophy equally at this point, so it's going to be very, very difficult to stop this Chelsea charge to go on and win a quadruple.
You mentioned that Chelsea losing the last 2 finals to Arsenal. Well, the one before that, they did, of course, lose to Manchester City. City's last League Cup title was in 2022. In fact, their last trophy was in 2022. Perhaps that's why Gareth Taylor lost his job, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But they beat Chelsea in that final. This year, back in the final, it was a very difficult route, much in contrast to Chelsea's really difficult route for Manchester City. They had Arsenal and they had Man United.
Yeah, and what was really bizarre about their route is they played both those sides back to back, and they ended up they lost to United in the league, then played them 4 days later and beat them in the League Cup. They lost to Arsenal in the league and played them 3 or 4 days later and beat them in a cup. It was a really, really bizarre circumstance, the way the schedule fell. But City did really, really well to get through those tests. They were the better side against United in a really close quarter-final. And then they came back from behind against Arsenal with that Mary Fowler goal in the last 30 seconds of the match to send them through. And that is the drama that you want to see in semi-finals, and hopefully we're going to get in the final. But both sides deserving of being here, obviously due to being in the UWCL, they didn't have to fanny around going through the group stage, so that was quite nice for them. But as you say, City have had to work their socks off to get here. Chelsea, it was a very, very kind draw.
Yeah, let's go back to earlier in the season then, when these two sides met in November. It was November the 16th, if I remember correctly. Chelsea won that game 2-0. Now that's going to have a bearing on how we view this game. So what can we take from that earlier meeting between the two sides and apply to this one? What did we learn in that game?
Well, what we learned, the main thing is that Sonia Bompastor is an incredible tactician and is better than Gareth Taylor. But that doesn't hold. I mean, only the first part of that sentence holds up now because there's no more Gareth Taylor. But yeah,
he's still alive.
Yeah, he's still somewhere. But yeah, I think that it's going to be a very interesting one. Again, with it was a similar. Obviously, City were lacking players then as well, but Chelsea still managed to find a way, and it was a pretty close game until Chelsea in that second half just started to take control of the match, and that will be the key aspect for me, is that if it is a close game, can Man City still hang in there in that last half an hour, or will we see the same where Chelsea went on, they scored 2 goals and they took that last half an hour by storm and blew City out the water? So that'll be interesting. It's different in a final because for City, even if it starts to slip away from them, there's that more belief and that more fight to get back into the game. So I think it will be similarly close. I think it will be pretty nervy to start off with. I think we'll see that from both sides. We've seen from both teams there has been a couple sloppy bits of play and a little bit of nerves in some big games this season. So it will be interesting to see how the start goes. But it's a really tight one to call. It's such an unknown now that obviously Gareth Taylor's been sacked and we've only seen them play once this season. It kind of means that we don't really have too much. It is a very unknown game, which from a neutral point of view, is very exciting going into a final.
Yeah.
But for the managers, it must be horrible.
Well, I think we'll get a good understanding of how these two sides match up over the next 10 days, considering there will be 4 meetings. And that's going to be something that's going to be really interesting to see how Chelsea and City, in fact, manage that run of games, because it's about what competitions you prioritise, which players you pick for certain games. I think in the case of Chelsea, who are seriously challenging for the Champions League, it is going to be even harder to see them winning all 4 of those matches. If they were, it would be a huge failure on the part of Man City, because you've got 4 chances to get it right. I think in that regard, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. This League Cup final, though, it feels like that has to be the immediate priority, especially for City, but for both teams. Chelsea have made it clear, Bombhurst has made it clear from the start of the season that she wants to win every trophy. So it's going to be interesting to see what team plays in that game. You'd expect full strength on both sides, but then both sides are going to play full strength again, presumably for the Champions League first leg.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think, obviously, it is a run of 4, but for the League Cup is the exception. This game, both sides will treat as a one-off match, your 90 minutes to beat your opposition. I think the next run of 3 will then be more of a consideration as to who plays where, what game do you prioritise. But at the end of the day, this is a cup final. It doesn't matter if you've got to play the opponent 3 times afterwards. I think that both managers, both teams will look at it and go, we put all our eggs into this basket, and then we just see what happens afterwards. Because it could shift the momentum, because it is it's something that's unheard of. You could lose a final to a certain opposition and then have to go and play them 3 times in a row. That's a really hard...
Someone is going to have that.
Yeah, and it's going to be a really hard mental shift for that team, because you have one at the end of Saturday afternoon. You're going to have one side who are in jubilation and one side who are devastated, and then they've got to go and meet each other all over again 3 times. So it's going to be for the players, it's going to be pretty tough. And well, I mean, they are obviously elite athletes.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll get on with it, unlike we might. But it's going to be difficult.
We're going to be flagging on stream. They're fine. It's us that have got the problem. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think the bigger management phase, as you say, will come in after the League Cup final. I think in that regard, Chelsea have the strength and depth that will really help them in those games. But in a one-off fixture, on the big occasion, with both sides playing what is their current full strength, I think it will be a really even game. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Looking tactically then, and we'll take inspiration from the start of the season. Obviously, City have changed. But what we saw from Bompasta was an ability to set her team up in a way that made it very difficult for the opponents to play. So Chelsea this season, a lot of the time, have been the possession-dominant side. They're the team that want the ball. They're the team that want to use the ball, and they want to create chances for themselves. In the City game, though, they were very different. They sat off a bit more, they delayed, but then they pressed aggressively, and they made it difficult for City. It's an incredible out-of-possession structure. They went player for player across the pitch. Hermano on Hasegawa especially was really useful, because City's build-up, all of their build-up play at the time, came through Yui Hasegawa. Now, I don't think Cushing is going to have put in complex, advanced, possession-based structures in 5 days. I think it'll be a very simple structure for Man City, and that has its advantages and disadvantages. On one hand, they'll probably have to rely on individual quality if they're going to get through this game. But on the other, City do have players who can do that.
Yeah.
They've got players like Mary Fowler. Yes, no, Lauren Hemp's a big loss, but they've got Fowler. They've got Khadija Shaw. If they create a chance for Shaw, there's every chance she just takes it. Even if it's only one chance, even if it's only half a chance, there's a chance she takes it. So I think in that regard, it's going to be interesting how Chelsea adapt to that. Against City, they had a clear game plan, a clear understanding of what the opposition were going to do and how Chelsea want to respond to that. The bigger question here is, can Bompastor do it on the fly? Because no one knows what to expect from Manchester City. Of course, you can look back at Nick Cushing when he was in charge of Man City, but that was 5 years ago, and the women's game has evolved massively since then. If he tries to play like that, Chelsea will win this game. So I don't know what to expect from Cushing, and more importantly, Sonia Von Pastor doesn't know what to expect from Nick Cushing. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he lines it up. I'd expect it to be a simple structure, and in that regard, potentially aids Chelsea. If they can come with a system they've been working on all season. The big question for me is, do Chelsea do what they've been doing in recent weeks with this 3-1-4-2, which I don't think has been massively successful, or do they switch back to the much more simplified 4-2-3-1, which gives them a bit more defensive security, uses both of the wing fullbacks as those wide attackers, and was very prosperous for the start of the season. I feel for this final, it's important Chelsea go back to that shape. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, the way that City will win this game is if they can catch Chelsea. If they can catch Chelsea in a moment of weakness, and as you say, by Chelsea playing with that single pivot, it has caused them a lot of problems. We saw it against Brighton, where Brighton just managed to pick off Chelsea in certain areas and cause loads of problems. And if Chelsea play that same way, Man City will look to do the same thing. But for Chelsea, you have in a game like this, I think you have to favour solidity. You have to favour familiarity as well. Clearly, the players are more familiar with the double pivot, with the 4-2-3-1, than they are with the single pivot system. So I think that for Bomassor, you have to play that way. As you say, it's for Nick Cushing. It's a blessing and a curse that no one knows what he's going to do, because as much as City have the element of surprise, at the end of the day, it's one of those where City probably don't know what he wants to do yet either, because it's been such a short period of time that he hasn't been able to do anything. So yes, they've got the element of surprise, but I don't think they're going to come out and do something extraordinary and play Chelsea off the park, because they just haven't had the timescale for that. So it's going to be really, really interesting. But as you say, City could win this game with one shot, because if they give that shot to Khadija Shaw and she puts it top corner, then they could end up winning this final. It's very unlikely, but that's the kind of quality they have. So for City, it will very much be, we're going to just play to stop Chelsea, and then we'll see what happens. And that will be Cushing. Cushing will just be sitting there, just watching the way that Chelsea have played, and just try and see how on earth he can eliminate their threats. And and then I think City's best shot is going to be to keep it 0-0, and then either nick a goal or take it all the way to penalties. Because I just don't see a way that City come to Chelsea, play on the front foot and win the game, because Chelsea will just set up like they did in November and completely just play them off the park.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see if Chelsea do try and play with the ball in this game, or whether they do go for that sort of system. Again, it's going to be difficult for them to judge, because who knows how Cushing City are going to come play. There may be a situation where both sides are sat in a low block and the ball's just in the middle of the pitch. No one wants to touch it. But I think it's going to be an interesting tactical one for those reasons. I think the other thing that was really key in the game in November was the performance of Chelsea's fullbacks. Baltimore and Lucy Bronze both had phenomenal games, and it's really important they do that again. We know that's where City's danger comes from. We've seen it time and time again. You've only got to look at the game from the weekend where City played Aston Villa in the Women's FA Cup, and in that game the ball went wide every time, because I mean, that's how Villa set up, very narrow, very compact, and City were kind of forced wide, but that is where City want to play the ball naturally anyway. If they wanted to create space in the middle, they could create tactical advantages to create space in the middle. Instead, they like to play out wide. Now, it's really important again that Bronze has a good game. Last time, she kept Lauren Hemp completely quiet. We don't expect Hemp to be back in this game. She may feature off the bench, but I will see though if she's involved across the matchups. But it's really important that Bronze has a good game here, because we saw in the game in November how important that was. Same goes to Sondi Baltimore if she indeed plays in this game.
Yeah, that'll be the big one for me, because if it's Baltimore versus Fagino, the form that Fagino's in, Baltimore is going to have to be really defensively disciplined.
Yeah,
and again,
she shut her down well in November, but
she did. But I just think that the difference is that Fagino looks a much better player than she did a few months ago. So and the way that Baltimore defended against the likes of Brighton was shocking, really. So
But then again, she was played much higher, so it depends on the system Chelsea use. If Chelsea play the 4-2-3-1 and Baltimore's used as a more traditional fullback where she can get forward but she has defensive responsibilities, rather than this 3-1-4-2 where she's playing really high and I don't think it particularly work. It depends very much on the system.
Yeah, this game is going to change a lot. This game is going to have so many different phases in this League Cup final. Due to the unknown tactical battle that could emerge, and the fact that both managers are going to have to adapt, on the fly. I don't see one side having a continued, consistent, control of the match. It is going to ebb and flow. It is going to be end to end at times. I think it's definitely one of those that to start with could be a little bit scrappy, but once one side settles down, it could end up really, turning. I think it's going to be a really good game either way. I like. As much as I like those, when you have those two teams who are so strong tactically, it's a brilliant tactical battle. Those unknown games are a little bit more exciting sometimes, because you have no idea what's going to happen, and it is going to keep changing, every 10, 15 minutes. The game is going to be evolving. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the game manages to develop as we get later and later. And who knows, we could end up going extra time and penalties, and that'd be even more exciting.
Yeah, potentially. I think it is going to be a fairly even game. I think the two sides, at least on paper, are quite evenly matched now. I will say, I think the fact that City don't have any senior centre halves available for this game is an issue. I think if it's Alexandru Lazel or Alexandru Pryor, we saw how a backline of Greenwood and Kennedy got bullied by Myra Ramirez. I think that would be even worse if it's Alexandru and Lazel. So that's something City got to be really mindful of, is if they are playing that high line, they've got to be careful.
Yeah.
Because if Ramirez gets in behind and just shrugs off the defenders, then she's in.
Yeah.
And we saw last time she went and scored from that.
And that'll be the thing. Ramirez will know, will smell blood. Ramirez is one of those strikers where if a defender's having a bad day or isn't comfortable, Ramirez will be all over it. And when you've got Alexandru who's out of form and Gracie Pryor, who is going to be playing in the biggest match of her career, and she's still very, very young, that is a centre-half partnership that Myra Ramirez will look at and she will fancy to get a goal or two on Saturday. And that's why I could potentially see Lazel, because coming in over Pryor, because she's a little bit more senior and perhaps she's still ridiculously young, not that much more senior, but has played more minutes at the top level. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see. Either way, it's not a great position to be in, I think, because that's when you look at that, the form that the front three's been in for Man City, the midfield, it all looks really strong. But the bit on paper where City look weaker than Chelsea is that back line. And it really, Yamashita's looked pretty comfortable the last couple of games. She's going to have a stellar game on Saturday, because there are going to be moments where I think, and similarly to Hannah Hampton as well, probably, there are going to be moments where the keepers are going to be relied on to keep their sides in the game, especially for City. But it's City, if they cut out the individual errors, especially from the likes of Alexandru, they could look much, much stronger.
Yeah.
Because Alexandru cannot afford to give the ball to Ramirez and put her one-on-one, because she will score, and that will cost City the game. So it's going to be fine margins on Saturday.
Yeah, I think as well, when you look at the centre-halves, it's going to be over the 4 games really interesting to see if they actually change their centre-halves at all, because Rekanak should be back from injury by the last one. Greenwood could be back from injury by the last game in the 4th, so that could be interesting. But until then, they're going to probably play the same centre-halves in all 3 matches, and I think fatigue will catch up with them there. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Let's give some predictions, though, going into the final then tomorrow. Obviously, we will be live for it, so we will do predictions in the build-up to that, but we may well change from what we're doing here. So, yeah, let's do some early predictions, though, ahead of the final. Harry, how do you expect it to go?
I think it's going to be a really, really tight game, as we've said. I think that both sides will score. I just think the attacking prowess of Man City will definitely find a goal for themselves. But I just think I've got to go with the team that are on form. I've got to go with the team who haven't lost a domestic game all season. I think Chelsea will nick it 2-1, but it'll be a really, really tight game. And I can potentially see that second goal for Chelsea coming in that last 10-15 minutes, similar to what we saw at Stamford Bridge early in the season. In that last quarter of the game, Chelsea just turn on the style and end up winning the match. But I don't see either side being blown away. I think both sides will score, and it's going to be a really tasty game.
Yeah, I think Chelsea will win. I think it could be a very commanding victory, actually. You look at the errors that City have made in the big game since the turn of the year. I think their defence still looks a little makeshift. I think people will say, yeah, but Chelsea haven't been great in 2025, and that may be true. But I think when they play against these tougher opposition, they do turn up. They do tactically outmaneuver the opposition. I think Bonposter is very good at coaching these big matches. So if she gets it right on the day, if she adapts well to whatever Cushing and City are trying, then I think Chelsea could win this game quite comfortably. They've got the players on the pitch to do so. They've got the attacking talent to really punish City here. So I think I'm talking 2-0, 3-0. I think I'm going to say 3-0 though. I think looking at the game earlier in the season, looking at the fact that I think City are weaker than they were then and Chelsea arguably are stronger now in terms of personnel, I think provided that Bonposter gets it right on the day and Cushing hasn't developed some insane system which is impossible to play against, which, it's possible that City come in this game and make it life really difficult for Chelsea. I just think in the time frame he's had, it'd be very difficult to see them becoming a huge threat for Chelsea. So in that regard, I just think Chelsea will be the stronger side here. So I'm going to say 3-0. I think Myra Ramirez will pose a huge threat. I think Lauren James will pose a huge threat. I think City will really struggle here to contain that Chelsea front line. Which, again, I know Chelsea haven't been firing a lot recently, but I also think City have been conceding way too many. So it's going to be, I think it's that juxtaposition. And yeah, City are good in front of goal, but I think on their day, if they set up well, Chelsea can keep the clean sheet against them.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence that Lauren James has come into form. So as we get into the business end of the season, 3 goals in her last 3.
I'm glad, though, because I think last season she was really good in the first half of the season. And then sort of tailed off at the business end. So I'd rather her not do anything for the first 5 months and then show up in March.
But a big couple of months, and if LJ plays anywhere near the level that she has been in the last few weeks, then she's going to be one hell of a player to handle, especially in games like a final. But yeah, as you say, Nick Cushing, he won't. He hasn't had enough. He won't set up for City to win. He's going to set up to stop Chelsea winning. And if that means that City get a trophy out of it at the end of the day, then that will work. That'd be a miracle. But yeah, I think that it's a final, but for Cushing, if they go out and they only lose by a 1-goal margin, they push Chelsea all the way, then I don't think that would be anything to be ashamed of. Because
no, but I think Cushing will come in with the want to go claim that title. I think he's that kind of manager where he's going to immediately set the expectation, because the players for City are good enough to win this final. I just don't think they've been on it this season. I think losing Lauren Hemp as well as someone who, as an individual, can have a profound impact on a game like this. I think losing Alex Greenwood, which is a huge part of their leadership, a huge part of their defensive organisation, and a brilliant player in her own right. I think losing those players, for me, is just too big a hole to miss.
Yeah, fair enough. And that's the thing. I think the frustrating thing will be for City is that if this game was the last one of the 4, there was potentially a chance that even if they didn't start, we could see cameos from Hemp and Greenwood, because they're both back on grass. So maybe that Champions League second leg will be the one that they target.
They could just be lying and then they show up in the starting 11 on Saturday.
Yeah, Nick Cushing's master plan is that everyone's fit again. But I'd be very surprised. But you never know. I think again, I think that the other side of the game that Cushing and City will target is that mental side of the game. Pull off though, game management is going to be crucial. Yeah. Running down that clock, being a pain, trying to frustrate Chelsea and Bombast Store. That has got to be the aim. Try as many antics as you possibly can to try and just put this Chelsea side off course. And if it works, sometimes the dark arts in football win you games. And I'm not saying that he's going to be smashing the ball out of Pride Park every time it comes to him, but
he might be.
I mean, that would be something. He'd get sent off very quickly, especially if Emily Heaslip refereeing. But yeah, I think those dark arts, they're going to have to try every tool they've got, everything in the book that they can throw at Chelsea.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. That, I think, though, rounds up everything we want to talk about today. Make sure you join us tomorrow. We'll be live 15 minutes before kickoff for the final. And we'll be live about 15 minutes after kickoff as well for whatever if there is a trophy, for the trophy lift, whenever that comes. I meant to say if there's extra time penalties, of course, we'll be covering that as well. So join us for the game tomorrow. Going to be a very exciting one. We'll be live from 12 o'clock for the 12:15 kickoff. That, though, does round up today's preview. Get involved in the comments down below. Let us know your predictions. Let us know your thoughts heading into the final. But thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.